All right, then I will get us going.
Okay, you guys ready?
Yep.
Wait, see if any more people come in, or just hit it.
I think we should just go.
All right.
Yeah, people can kind of catch up as we go on.
Roger that. Okay, so this is the panel on ethics in art. For those who are in the wrong place, that's what we are. I've got some questions that were sent to me. I have a couple of my own as well to throw in there. It should be a lively conversation for the attendees. We can see your questions if you type them in the chat, and we'll address them. As if we miss one, just keep telling us. We'll get it eventually. So the first question, I got to find all the other questions, but the first question I had is, should art adhere to ethical standards? Or should it be free for its expression purposes?
Should we introduce ourselves first?
That's a very good idea. that would be the ethical thing to do. Yes. I'm Chris Verrilli, the moderator.
I'm Alan Pollock, guest artist.
Excellent.
I'm Wendy Van Camp. I'm an author, poet, and an illustrator.
I'm Chaz Kemp. I am a Denver-based illustrator. I do a lot of fantasy, sci-fi, steampunk, cyberpunk, and that kind of thing. And I'm really happy to be here.
So I'm Amy Armstrong. I do a lot of storytelling and short story writing and just like kind of, I don't know, a whole bunch of stuff. So anyway, it's cool to be here. So I'm interested in seeing what comes from this conversation.
I like the way we all say here. So, you're here, but you're there, and yeah. Okay, so already, again, the first question, I'd like to hear everybody's thoughts on whether or not art should have some sort of ethical standard, and if so, to what end?
It depends on how you define an ethical standard. You know, I'm not really one that likes to put a limit on art. I think we should all have our own voice and express ourselves. I always say, be original, be true to your own voice, but allow yourself to be inspired by artists that you admire. So, I mean, there is some gray area. How far does this admiration go? How much can you use from what you see other people doing before you cross a line and you're doing something that's not going to be too groovy to the artist community? So I think it's a great discussion to have. I think with the way the internet is today, there's people picking and grabbing things at will without a thought, thinking, oh, it's just for personal use, so I don't need to worry about paying anybody. And, you know, this is not a good thing. You know, artists are entitled to make a living. You know, just like you wouldn't call a plumber to come to your house to fix your sink and say, oh, you know, why should I pay you? Well, you shouldn't expect that from your local artist too. So yeah, but there needs to be kind of an understanding about how far you can go, because there is such a thing as fan art. There are, you know, fan music, fan art, fan fiction, and that does have a place, but we need to define what it is. And I'm going to just leave it at that. Somebody else can take over.
Well, I know if we're talking strictly about copying somebody's work or you know, I don't know, I guess how far are you going where it's considered copying? I know that when I worked at TSR, which is the Dungeons and Dragons company, I'm not going to say anybody's names or anything because I don't want to get anybody in trouble. I mean, it's the people that work there already know about it, so it's not like that's a secret to them. But there was an artist, not one of the staff artists. It was another guy that was there who created a piece of art that very much ripped off Frank Frazetta. I mean, anybody that knows anything about fantasy art would see and go, yeah, that's that painting for us. That's definitely Frank Frazetta. There's no question about it. And he changed a few things. So obviously he didn't change enough of the painting for someone not to recognize it as Frank Frazetta. So that's really the problem there, is like, how do you, you know, I mean, it's one thing to look at photo reference online and use photo reference to create your art, and how far you're copying that photograph, how much you're using of that photograph before you're actually stealing the photograph, and you know, that's copywritten. But when you're actually going in and taking a famous illustrator that everyone recognizes and then not, I mean, how much can you possibly change a painting that's so iconic to people that know the guy? I mean, it's kind of hard to, I don't know how much you could possibly change it before people are like, oh, that's not Frank Frazetta anymore. I mean, you really would have to do a lot. So so that can be a really big problem.
Chaz or Amy?
Let's see. Well, my concern is less about the, well, I mean, when it comes to the ethics of things, I mean, like, it sounds like this is more of a question of, like, you know, using other people's art and, or, you know, characters or images, kind of established brands in some cases that other people have created or other franchises have created. And, you know, I mean, I think that that's definitely an important thing to consider, is just like, you know, at what point do you stop saying something's inspired by something, and at what point do you just say, like, okay, you're just kind of ripping somebody off. But and I mean, I do feel pretty strongly about that. I mean, I write original work, and, you know, I think that it's great to honor, you know, people who have come before me, and to, you know, definitely, like, I mean, incorporate some of that and some of that inspiration into themes and characters. Like, I think it's also important to just be cognizant that there is a point where you're going too far. Like, I mean, I even had a story that I was thinking about writing that was a horror story about, you know, like, what would happen to Regan as an adult, you know, from The Exorcist. But then, you know, I was thinking about that, and I was like, well, I mean, I can't really use Regan because, I mean, that's somebody else's character, you know? So it's like, I actually ended up coming up with some ideas for that story that were a lot more interesting as a result too. So,
but with that said, how does somebody like, I'm trying to think of the author's name. His last name is McGuire, where he does Wicked, and he does a bunch of Son of Wicked, and you know, all those kind of, you know, Hidden Seek, and there's a whole bunch of spins on Alice in Wonderland and different things. So how do they get around that, where it's almost, I don't know if it would be considered satire or not, but like, how do they get around where they're kind of doing there was the children's book, like the three little pigs and others story. There was something like that where it's like the Three Little Pigs, he's actually mentioning the Three Little Pigs, but then he's doing his warped spin-off of it. So how do you get around that?
Well, that's copyright law, and there is a statute of time that your work is protected. But once it's old enough, then the copyright protection ends, and then anyone can use it. For instance, I do write a spin-off of Jane Austen's book Persuasion. I have a series of books using her characters and using her Regency time period, but I have a different plot line of my own, and I bring up different aspects of the sub-characters that I think would be interesting to me and hopefully to the readers. And there is a whole subgenre of Jane Austen books, mainly off of Pride and Prejudice, hundreds of them, and authors making comfortable living off of Jane Austen's name and off her characters. The key is her books are over 200 years old, and they have fallen into that verse where basically anyone can use her work. Alice in Wonderland, Treasure Island, all these classics are old enough that writers can use them. They can use the characters. I remember back when there was like a big newspaper article when Charlie Chaplin fell into this, and suddenly you saw Charlie Chaplin everywhere because it was over 100 years old or some such. What you need to do is, if you want to write fan fiction, you need to choose something that is able to be legally used. You know, if you're a small crafter, I know many crafters that will make one-offs of things, and because they only do a small number of prints, I think the legal number is up to 10 or 11, but after that, the legal people will come after you.
When
So you
it's
gotta
not,
be very careful with that kind of thing.
I think the term you were looking for earlier is public domain.
Thank you. Yes,
Yeah.
public domain. Yeah, I got the concept. I don't always have the word, but yeah, these are things that are legally spelled out. And if you're going to do kind of copies, you need to be very cognizant of that, because there are some corporations out there that will come after artists, and they will sue big. Paramount is one of them for like the Star Trek franchise. You need to be very careful. Now that Disney owns Star Wars, another franchise that you can't really do fan fiction or fan art without the worry of being sued. And they have deep enough pockets that they can come after you. But honestly, this is not exactly about ethics, though. I mean, ethic to me is more of the community and how we treat each other. It's also maybe an etiquette problem. Well, I shouldn't even say it's a problem, but it's something that we need to discuss and understand as a community so that we can set our own standards and hopefully abide by those standards. And I think it would be helpful if we had more discussions about ethics and art in general.
There's a lot of discussions of legalities.
Consensus going on.
There's a lot of discussions of legalities in art, but not a lot of ethics discussions. We have one statement from the audience. Gregory McGuire said, writing fanfic may be a legal gray area, but if you're not trying to make a profit, it's generally considered okay. Agree, disagree?
I don't know. I think if you're using a franchise, and even if you've made no money and they technically can't take anything from you, I would still be very hesitant. And mind you, I know of many fan fiction authors out there, and I've enjoyed reading them. I'm not saying that it's wrong, but I think they are bringing something on themselves. I think if you're going to write fan fiction, you keep it very small. You keep it in a very small community. You don't let it go wide. Just make it something between you and your friends. Writing fan fiction can actually be very beneficial to a beginning author, because you have a world that you're familiar with, and it does the world building for you, and it gives you a template of characters to play with. And when you're a beginner, this can be really helpful to getting you into the mode of writing your own books. But I think there comes a point where, as an author, you kind of take the training wheels off. Of course, here I am still writing a fanfic when I say this. Oh. But yeah, but I still think there's an ethical question. Yeah. Why do we need to take from somebody else? Amy? Anyway, I don't mean to run on.
So, well, okay. So one thing that, occurs to me here is just, and this is partly being a philosophy nerd when I was in college, so I apologize in advance. But, it's like when I think about, like, when you're talking about, like, the ethical questions here, like, I think that there's often, like, if you look at the work of, like, John Stuart Mill and utilitarianism, there's, you want the highest good and, like, the least harm, basically. So, he said, like, pleasure and absence of pain, but, I don't want to get the people with kinks out there too excited about that. So, but, I think that, like, with the fan fiction, that's a good example of, like, kind of, well, what is the possible harm? And if you're not making money off of it. So, like, let's say, well, okay, well, first of all, it's like, if you're not making money off of it, personally, there's no guarantee that you're not, in a sense, taking money away from another creator, because if people are reading your fan fiction for free, they may be less inclined to pay for the work that someone else created when they put in all the time and effort of developing those characters and that world, or taking money away from their estate and causing financial distress to their family when they work to leave them a legacy. And the other thing is there's the issue of reputation and kind of brand management. And so like the thing is, I mean, like, let's say like you have, you know, a fan fiction porn series of Minnie, you know, with Minnie Mouse and I don't know,
Darth Vader.
Donald Duck, Darth Vader getting it on or whatever. I mean, that's not how those characters were originally intended by their creators, and those are not the kinds of characters they originally wanted them to be. And I mean, it does do a certain amount of damage to the franchise, you know, when you do something like that. And so I mean, it's like, I mean, people are welcome to disagree with me and just be like, well, it's art, it's all good, you know, but it's like, I mean, that's not really, I mean, it's not doing good in an absolute sense, right?
Let me bounce that back to our panel then. Take Wicked, for example. That was not the way the author intended those characters to be. I'm not sure it did any damage. Chaz, what do you think?
Well, I think in general, I think if it's in, you know, if it's in public domain, basically, and they are creating a story for the purposes of profit, etc., but they're creating a story that kind of continues the legacy, that honors the legacy and continues it, I don't think that's really a problem, especially if it's in public domain. I have a problem when people take, say, for example, Sesame Street characters and they do weird, horrible, awful things to them. That's, to me, it's like, okay, if it's fan fiction or whatever, sure, you could do it. If it's just, you're just basically doing parody art, okay, I guess you can do that kind of thing. But to me, that's kind of a drag. To go back to an earlier point, I feel that once something is in public domain, it's essentially fair game at that point. You're not really actually hurting anyone. If the heirs or, you know, the people who hold the legacy, if they want to continue to hold on to it, then, you know, of course they'll continue to pay. But for the most part, I mean, you know, Fu Manchu is in public domain, Dr. Moreau is in public domain, The Bride of Frankenstein, etc. So if people wanted to take those characters and create something new with those same characters, I suppose you can. Art-wise, however, and I'll keep this really brief, you know, we've all copied artists when we were first learning how to draw. We've all copied, you know, the great comic book artists and the great works of art from the Renaissance, etc., just so that we can learn how to do it, and that's cool. But at some point, I think that if you are still doing that as a professional, whether it's an artist or a writer or whatever, you know, what I would say in terms of how you think about the ethics is think about how long it took for some of those artists and authors to really make it big to the point where their dream and their passion could actually make them a living. You know, they created their own characters, they worked them for years and years and years, and finally their big break happens, and now they're making money, and now they're doing well. They've got money that they can leave to their grandchildren, etc. And this was all basically a lifetime of work. And then for somebody to come along afterwards, once those characters become really big and famous, for somebody to come along afterwards and say, well, they've made enough money, I'm going to draw those characters now and sell those sketches at a con because, well, they've made enough money and, you know, I'm sure it's fine. Imagine if someone does that to you and your legacy and your characters that you've created out of your head. How would you feel if someone did that to you? So that's kind of the way that I view ethics and that sort of thing.
Okay, I suppose we should work on some of the questions they gave me. The first one is kind of vague, but we'll start with Wendy and have you guys go around. Define your personal set of ethics as they're related to art.
Well, like I said, I think you should be original and be true to your own voice, but allow yourself to be inspired by other artists that you admire. And I think you need to learn to not cross that line, to, again, be original, not do what every other person is doing. I mean, I've been a professional artist for 25 years. And I mean, I've seen it all. Trust me, out in the field, out under my big 10 by 10 tent out in the, oh my gosh. The thing is, what I have noticed down through the years is the artists that are successful are the ones that do not go copying other people, that they have their own vision and they do their own work. And that is what brings the customers to them. So if you are going to steal, that you really have, there's really not as much incentive as you might think. And it's the mark of somebody who's new, I think, also, that does this kind of thing. So I don't know. To me, it's just common sense. Just be true to yourself. Do what inspires you, what you enjoy doing, and don't worry about taking from other people. And
Okay.
I
Alan?
guess that's that.
Alan, what's your set of personal ethics for art?
I mean, it's similar. I mean, I'm constantly looking at new art. I mean, I look at new art every day on Instagram and Pinterest and whatever, and constantly seeing, hundreds of guys and women that are blow my mind. And you can be inspired by it and try to see how far people are pushing ideas and their drawing style and different painting techniques and things like that. And you try to incorporate it into your way of doing things. But I don't, for me personally, I mean, I never in my mind thought like, oh, I'm going to copy this guy's stuff or, rip off this guy's character. Or, I mean, I'm a, I love horror movies and fantasy and science fiction, and there's so many great characters, but, and it would be fun to draw them for myself just for fun, but I wouldn't make a living doing it. It's just, I don't know why. I guess just because I want to do my own thing. I want to have my own style, my own look, and continue to improve and get better at it. And I don't see the point in just copying someone else's stuff, quite honestly, because you're never going to be known as your own person. You're just going to be known as, that's the guy that rips off that other guy. I mean, that doesn't make any sense. I mean, it really doesn't. So, so yeah, I mean, I don't know. I can't see, I just don't see the point. I don't see the point in copying someone else's stuff,
Yes.
I would agree. And with a lot of what Wendy was saying, I agree completely with her, both she and Alan. There's, from a branding perspective, there is absolutely no way for you as an artist to stand out above the crowd if you are copying someone else's work, you're copying someone else's style. I see this a lot with anime, especially. Anime is really huge, has been for decades, and there are tons and tons and tons of artists who draw characters in the anime style. And that's fine when you're learning how to do it because it's something that you're really passionate about. If it gets that pencil into your hand and it gets you drawing, awesome. But when it comes to actually having a career as an artist, Alan and Wendy are right. You're never going to stand out from the crowd if your stuff looks like everyone else's. There's no way for you to get noticed, But so for me, I tried very, very hard to develop my own style, and it took me a very long time to do it. And yeah, it's a drag sometimes because I don't get a lot of big time gigs sometimes with big publishers and stuff because they're like, well, your style isn't like anybody else's, so I don't know if maybe someday we might have a project that we think you'd be good for, and that's okay. I don't mind because hey, I stand out and people know my art for what it is. So I'd rather walk my own road than take the easy way out.
Me.
Okay, so all right, well, I did jot down some notes for my own thought, I'm like, my own ethics when it comes to art, and I do want to just like go over that, but I also want to like respond to some of what I heard. And, I think that definitely a lot of it does come down to like the purpose of art for me. And this is like what ultimately dictates my ethics, is that it's something that is a positive contribution to the greater beauty of the work, the body of work in general, as in what all of us are working on as artists, and also a positive contribution to a greater, deeper, and more inclusive understanding of the human condition. And that's actually something that really resonated with me when I was taking aesthetics. And we read about Dostoevsky's philosophy of aesthetics, which was basically that the power of art is to be able to bring people closer together through understanding. And you're not going to do that without expressing your own unique perspective and and just echoing the same things that have been said over and over, the same things that have been drawn over and over again. And the other thing is, like, there's definitely a price to be paid for that. And artists do all the time. Certainly, like, sometimes like it's a very real thing that the world's not necessarily ready for you at a certain time. I know Mark Twain actually, even though he was a very successful author in his time, didn't get the same sort of respect or notoriety that Henry James did, even though his writing style was much closer to the kind of writing that we want to read now than Henry James is. And there is also the issue of, like, sometimes, you can end up writing a book or drawing a character, and, publishers out there will look at it and go, well, I don't know what this is. Obviously this is garbage because it's not like anything else. And but I think that you still owe it to yourself to do it anyway, because if we're not going to express who we are and we're not going to do our thing, then that's just tracing, right? I don't know. It's not really creating. So, yeah, I guess that's it. I'll shut up now.
I like where you went down doing something good. For the panel in general, do you think artists have a responsibility for their art to do something good versus doing harm? And everybody remembers War of the Worlds and the near panic it caused when it came out. If you did something like that in today's environment, you could have some very bad results. Would the author bear an ethical responsibility for that, or the artist?
That's a good question.
It is a good question. It's funny because bringing up Orson Welles and War of the Worlds, that radio play put him on the map. It's what got him the notoriety to go on to do Citizen Kane and all these other films, becoming one of our great classic filmmakers of all time. But if he hadn't had the War of the Worlds and caused the panic, would he have been recognized as him? Maybe he would have. He's very talented naturally. But that was part of his mystique, part of what created. And the people, even though people panicked, I don't think anyone died, from what I recall. I could be wrong. So I think in that case, I actually think it was not necessarily a negative thing. And society did learn something. They learned, if you hear something on the radio, think first before you necessarily believe. It's we've since now are a little more discriminating about what we hear before we panic. We check our sources more.
Chaz,
that's the theory.
Even know. Huh?
I see Chaz's eyebrow going up.
Yes. Hopefully that is an agreement. But yeah, I mean, what if we create something that causes such an uproar that frightens people? I mean, we have global pandemics going on. There's always the nuclear issues. What
I
if
mean, there's some.
we as
Do
an
you think it's?
artist does something to set that off? Or maybe we are responsible in a sense. Again, this is maybe more something on scale.
Alan?
I don't know. I'm curious
No, I
to
was
hear
just
what
going to
the other
say.
people have to say.
I mean, if something like that happened today, what do you think would happen to him?
To the
That could
author,
pull
the
off-
artist?
Yeah, I mean, if someone tried to pull off something like War of the Worlds today, whether it be on social media or whether it be through a radio show or television or something, I mean, you'd think
You could argue people
he'd be
are.
arrested. He'd be killed or arrested, I would think. Something crazy.
You could argue that groups like QAnon are already doing that.
Well,
Yeah. I
mean,
think if.
I
Oh,
mean, me
sorry. go ahead.
personally, I don't think I'm going to create any art that's going to create that much of an uproar. Quite honestly.
But I know that as myself as an author, I've actually come around to this idea of writing of a positive future anyway. I think this is something brought up by David Brin several years ago when the dystopian trope was just taking over everything. And he was saying, you know, classic science fiction used to be about uplifting our society, showing us how we can be better in the future. And he's going, how did we get away from that idea? And I agree with him. And I would like to write stories that show how we can live in the future and show what new ways we can deal with this new technology, but in a way that's positive for us as a culture.
That could
And
be
to
part
give
of your personal
examples of
ethics
how to
code.
live. But that's my personal thing. I'm not saying everyone needs to do that. If you want to write dystopians, go for it. I mean, I'm not against that. But yeah, but if more of us wrote about a positive future, I think it might be helpful in the world. That's just my thing. What can I say?
Amy?
Anyway, I think I've gotten off the track here. That's okay.
no. Well, I think, the idea of instilling hope is actually, I mean, that's a very positive thing to do. I mean, I think sometimes a little fear can be a good thing. But for example, everyone is familiar at this point with The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood about the potential price of complacency and inaction. And, there are some similar stories out there too. I mean, Carrie Vaughn, I think, has some, and there's also Louise Erdrich, The Future Home of the Living God, it's another story along the same lines. And I wouldn't say that the future that they put out there is completely bereft of hope in people as individuals, but I think that there is a certain word of warning in there that we do need to, when we don't do what we can to help each other, then things can go seriously wrong, and that, as on your own, you can make a bigger difference than you might believe. And the other thing is that now, I mean, admittedly, I don't spend a lot of time, or any time for that matter, on the dark web or on conspiracy theory sites.
Neither do I.
Yeah, I mean, having a bunch of gamers talk about wanting to rape me because I wouldn't date them, isn't my cup of tea for how I spend my spare time. But, I think that there is that it's that's another thing. I mean, I think there's a difference between doing the War of the Worlds, with the intention of entertaining people, and spreading a conspiracy theory to try to achieve a certain political result that could be potentially really harmful to a lot of people. And I mean, that I don't really see that as an artistic goal. I mean, I see that more as political manipulation, but also Yeah, I mean, that's mostly it, I guess. I mean, there's like something else that came to mind, about just like kind of the issue of like harming. I mean, there's a
Yeah,
lot of
it's a
possible issue of harm and like tokenizing and fetishizing people and glorifying, like
yeah.
violence against certain
A
groups.
lot of people thought that 50 Shades crossed the line in ethics and treatment of women.
Mm.
Yeah.
So I'll go back to our list here now, and I'll start this one with you. Is it ethical to use real people in your art without telling them?
Real people as in famous people, or people that that even friends?
This says people. So I'd say
Okay.
both.
Any people.
I know, yeah, address both.
If I ever use any kind of photo reference, I usually, if it's of a person, I'm usually shooting it myself, so they already know. They already have permission. They're giving me permission already, and usually they're getting paid. So that's pretty much settles that. But I haven't done any paintings of famous people, except one time I was doing a convention where Elvira was going to be there, and I thought like, oh, it'd be cool to do a painting of Elvira, but I knew that I wasn't going to be able to sell any prints or anything unless I had her permission. So I did the painting. I brought the painting with me. I brought the prints with me, but I went to her table first and with the painting and the prints, and I asked for her permission. And she says, oh, you can do whatever you want with them. And I said, well, I just wanted you to see the painting, and I wanted to get your permission if it's okay, if I sell some prints. And she's like, that's fine with me. So I traded her some prints. She gave me signed a video DVD for me, and we took a picture, and that was the end of it. She was very kind, of course. So I don't know if everybody would be that kind. But that's the one time where I had that kind of a situation. I personally wouldn't go using someone. I wouldn't do it. I mean, if it was a portfolio piece for my to show, like for an ad, if I was trying to say like, look, I can do likenesses, I might do something like that. Obviously, I'm not going to call Johnny Depp and say, can I use your picture? I'm doing an ad. I'm trying to get work, but I'm not making any money off it. However, I guess in a roundabout way you would if you got a job through it. But I don't know how that works, but if you're going to get work doing likenesses of people or movie posters or whatever it may be, you have to show an art director that you can do it. And that's really the only way to show them. You didn't get permission from those people that you just did those likenesses of, but you're not marketing yourself like, I do Johnny Depp paintings, you want to buy one? Or I'm doing all these prints, you want to buy some? Like, you're not doing that. You're trying to get a job. And I'm assuming once you get a job doing likenesses, they already have the permission for you to do those likenesses, Same thing probably goes for caricatures too. I would assume it's the same kind of thing.
So Amy, it's a little bit different from a writer's standpoint. Did you actually put real people in your writing and not tell them?
Well, I mean, I actually do that quite often, but I don't think they would recognize themselves. I mean, I have a little running joke about, one book I'm working on where I'm like, every time I look at a little can of Vienna sausages, I think of the men on the Denver dating scene. So I don't think they see themselves that way. So I think I'm safe.
It's funny. I actually have used real people in my writing because I do short story memoirs on occasion. So these are incidents that happened to me personally, and I do write about the people around me, but I do make a point not really to use their names. So I'll describe them. I will paraphrase what they may have said in relation to my perception of it. So they're there, and I am using them, and I am trying to be as accurate as possible of what happened. But of course, we're our own narrators. Maybe we see the world a little differently than somebody else does, if you know what I mean. And I'm not necessarily negative toward people on purpose. I'm just simply doing stories about things that happened to me as I saw them. So I am using real people, but I'm trying to do it in a way that's respectful to them. I'm not doing like hit pieces or anything like that. Again, I tend to be positive in my writing. I'm just, that's the way I am. I'm not into dystopian and horror.
Right.
Although, believe it or not, I have written horror by accident, evidently. But yeah, how that happened. But I guess it was just the particular story was just very emotive and somewhat negative. But anyway, we don't go down that track. But I have done it, but I think you have to be careful when you do it, and not to cause harm if you're going to do that. Because if you do, people do have a right to sue you, and rightly so. If you're going on and writing in public about somebody, using their name, describing them doing something nefarious, they have a legal right to come after you, and you need to be aware of that if you're going to do that. But again, that comes back to ethics, and the law is kind of clear on that, right? I think you can use a public figure in your writing or in your art, but you can't really use private citizens. So I know, like when I used to do filmmaking, we would get blanket permits. And if somebody happened to be in the scene, we would go after them with a permit and get them to sign, making sure that they gave permission to use their likeness. But I'm out of Los Angeles, and let's just say people are a little hyper about things like that here with the Hollywood nearby. But yeah, again, it comes to that fine line, what you're going to do or not. I find when I do my sketching, I don't tend to sketch people. Most of my sketches are about the planets or outer space and things like that. These are really general objects that anyone could draw, and it wouldn't be a problem. So, yeah. Anyway.
Since we're back to the visual, Chaz.
Could you repeat the original question? I'm sorry.
Original question is it ethical to use real people or your cat in your art without telling them?
Yeah, it depends on the circumstances. I use a lot of photographic references all the time. But generally from the models and things like that, I always get permission. Either I'm taking the pictures myself, or I've gotten permission from them, like from DeviantArt, for example, where they, I talk to them and say, hey, you've got a couple of pictures that I think I might want to use for an upcoming project. Is that okay? And sometimes, you have to pay them a little money or something like that. So that's fine. But they're always aware. They don't necessarily care. As long as I acknowledge and ask their permission, they're usually pretty okay with it. And also, I think if artists use sites like Shutterstock and sites like that, where they, you pay a monthly fee, and then you can use those pictures for whatever you want. Those models have already given their permission to the organization, and so that's fine. But either way, they got paid, and you're paying the company, and so it's okay, But I would say definitely do something like that. Once you start grabbing images off the internet, well, that's when, I find that, if you really want to use that image, well, you should probably try to get their permission if at all possible. So.
Okay, I have one more question that was handed out. It has to do with more visual art, I think. It says, with computer rendering becoming more sophisticated, example, deep take AI videos, where do you see the ethics of this falling out, or is it personal use okay?
Now, this is something I've actually only come across recently, the deep fake videos on YouTube. Basically where they'll take one actor and superimpose it over another to, like Tom Cruise is Iron Man, or Harrison Ford is the new Han Solo, and it's very seamless. I mean, if you didn't really know that it was being done, it could fool you. And then conversely, the new filmmaking techniques they've been using, where they put the background behind the actors and the props, and then they film that with the actors in front of it. The Mandalorian is a good example of that. And you really wouldn't know that that's not out in the desert of Tatooine. I mean, it's very good. And from what I understand, other series are starting to pick this technology up. I suspect it's going to become more commonplace. So, but I view it as really another form of fan art at this point. If it's up on YouTube and if they're not making a living on it, well, of course, if it's on YouTube, they may have it monetized. I don't know about that. But if it's, just doing it for the fun as an artist for practice, just like with fanfic or with fan art, I think it's okay. It's just another medium. But if you're doing it to intentionally fool people, that's another story altogether. And I'm sure the legal eagles will get busy with shoring up that before much longer. Anyway, I'll let somebody else talk.
Anybody?
I think it's Alan's turn.
I'm not sure exactly what you're asking, because I only use digital art to paint my art, so I'm not sure what you're asking.
The question is, with computer rendering becoming more sophisticated, the deep fake AI videos that Wendy talked about, where do you see the ethics of it falling out? It's kind of a vague question.
Yeah.
Do they mean maybe poser art as well? Or
Yeah.
The Maya, that kind of thing, the 3D art that's created?
I think maybe, yeah, they're talking if you were doing some of this deep fake stuff without permission, or to portray things as they are not.
Well, anytime you do something like that, I mean, it goes back to using likenesses and stuff. I would assume that would be a problem.
I would assume,
so, yeah, I mean, I don't know.
I think the question kind of answers itself in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it does.
If you're doing stuff like that to intentionally fool people about a political candidate or something like that, obviously that's unethical. Doesn't really matter which side of the aisle you're on. It's unethical.
Yeah.
Sorry, didn't mean to. I was just thinking though, with Carrie Fisher in Star Wars, how she died suddenly before the final film of her trilogy was done. They did use deep fake to insert her in some. Well, maybe it wasn't that one. It was in the Rogue One movie. I'm sorry. And that was an example of that. And then from what I understand, they're considering using that for Mark Hamill to bring in a younger Luke Skywalker into new series. So, or maybe they'll use another actor and just do the face. I'm not sure what's involved. But what got me was the legal issue behind it. They had to go to Carrie Fisher's family and ask for permission to use her likeness in this manner. And I think in the end, I mean, considering her mother died the next, 1 day later, 2 days later,
Her daughter.
her brother finally ultimately said no, and his rights were respected. And I thought that was a very refreshing outcome, to be honest.
And the second part of the question is personal use okay?
I still think it's more like fan fiction, but I don't know. I think that it's still out because this stuff is getting really intensive and it can be used very nefariously at this point.
I mean, if it gets to the point where they can go and they can take Marilyn Monroe and they can put her in a new movie, like an entire movie, by using her, somehow capture shots or something digitally where it's like it looks like her through the whole movie and she's interacting with people. I mean, it'd be amazing to see, but you would think they would have to get permission from somebody, unless there's nobody around that they could get permission from. But I mean, if there was, you would think they would have to do that.
Well, there's another use for this deep fake stuff. I hesitate to bring it up, but I guess in Britain, there's a bot that you can use to just insert anybody's photo that you just take from anywhere, and it renders back with the person naked. And evidently there's been a rash of these going out on the internet lately. And this has been causing quite a stir, evidently. I understand these things are not, they're not as realistic as they could be. The science of doing it is not complete. But the whole idea of the invasion of piracy of people who didn't know that their images were being used this way has been coming up. And because we're global and international, people can be doing this stuff from anywhere on the planet, and you don't really have any legal means to get after them right now. So I think that this deep fake stuff is going to be important coming up. I don't know if it's necessarily going to be important as us as artists. I think on the art end, it seems to be handled in an ethical way. But for nefarious reasons or people wanting to stir up trouble, it's a different story. I think we're going to be seeing a lot of problems with it in the next few years. We'll see how it goes.
Artists never want to stir up trouble.
We have about 10 minutes left. Any questions from our attendees?
Seems to be one.
I don't know any of you, so I wouldn't even know what to ask.
Well, why don't we go through and let each one of you make a closing statement and try not to argue with each other. Not a debate.
Well, I'll go first. I can make it fairly quick. Obviously, I'd say try to be compassionate. Try to put yourself into the other artist's shoes or the person's shoes who is the holder of the intellectual property. Imagine them struggling for years and years to create something really wonderful that they're really passionate about, and it finally takes off and it becomes successful. Now imagine how you would feel if someone did that to you, as I mentioned before. And I think that kind of thought process itself should hopefully guide you into what's ethical and what isn't. Imagine how you feel. So if you put yourself in someone else's shoes, I think you can go a long way towards deciding for yourself what's ethical and what isn't.
And Chaz, just so we do the ethical thing, we'll send a contract over. Your cat can sign to giving us permission to have his tail on the video.
Oh, she's fine with it. She already gave me her permission by jumping on my desk.
Alan?
I've known people in my life that have been okay with stealing and with pirating, and they think it's great to be able to go online and get this for free and get that for free and swipe this and swipe that, and that's their personality. And I don't know how you change their ways away from being that way, because it's kind of how they are. Me personally, I wouldn't be comfortable with stealing from anybody for any reason. So you got to go out in the world. If you're going to conventions and you're around other artists, especially, like, it gets around real fast that you're doing that. I mean, everybody knows that you're not hiding from anybody. So, like, for me, it's the last thing I would want. I want my peers to respect me and my art and think that I'm doing all I can to be the best that I can be. And last thing you want is for them to look at you like, that's the guy that's like swiping this and stealing from that and copying this, and like, who wants that? So, to me, if you have the talent and the creativity, you don't need to copy from anybody. Like, you have all that power in your brain and your hands to do whatever you want to do. Why would you need to go down that road? So, and like Chaz was saying, I mean, you're trying to create a brand and a look and a style. You're not going to get that from looking like someone else. So, that's it for me.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't know. I liked Chaz's comment about compassion and, kind of like the implication of, there being karma out there. I mean, I tend to take that as a very dark sort of version of it. I mean, sometimes you can be the karma, but I think that, like, what it does come down to, though, is that it's like, if you want respect from your community, you need to start by being respectful of your community, and that means other people, other creators, and their work. And yeah, if you're not, word definitely gets around. And again, just going back to, I mean, I think it's a good idea for everybody to have their own, be pretty clear on their own ethics, especially in what we do, because I mean, I think that artists often feel like, who's really paying attention to us? But I think that, there is a lot of power in what people consume, and, we are part of that. And so, I mean, I think it is important to just, make sure that, sometimes you have to ask, like, is this something that's actually making a valuable, meaningful contribution? Or is it not? Because I mean, if you're just spreading hate or, just stealing from people, I mean, that's ugly. That's not art.
And saving the best for last, Wendy.
Well, thank you for that. Actually, I'm very much in awe of my fellow panelists. I feel like I just snuck in here by accident. But anyway, I agree with what everyone has said. I basically think use common sense. Don't do to other people which you don't want to have done to yourself. That's a pretty basic tenet for life, really. And just be cool and follow that inner muse. It's going to lead you to places that you just never realized is even out there. And enjoy the journey.
Awesome. We had one comment from the attendees. Denise said it was very insightful and thanks all of you for your perspectives. I would say the same thing. Thanks, everybody. It was a great panel.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you guys. It was an honor,
Yeah.
really. And thanks for moderating.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you, Christopher.
Thank you.
Thanks for reminding me to do introductions.
No worries.
Did we want to end with doing websites and all that kind of stuff, or
Sure.
do we have time?
We've got about 3 minutes.
I don't think we have enough time for everybody.
She
do
just
it
wants to
quick.
be fair.
Go ahead,
I
start quick.
do. Well, do unto others, right? Well, if I can, I'll do real quick. Wendy Van Camp. My website is nowastedink.com. It's a website for readers and writers of science fiction. My latest book is a poetry collection called The Planets. I'm both the poet and the illustrator of the book. And you can find it on Amazon and other places. It is nominated for an Elgin Award. And I'll leave it at that because let's let everyone get in there if they want.
Mine's easy. It's just alanpollock.com. ALAN instead of ALLEN. Yeah. So that's it.
Jazz?
ChazKemp.com. And I have an Oracle deck on Etsy called the Ashelon Oracle deck, which is pretty cool, 3-year project. And my wife, Carolyn Kay, has the 3rd book of her series. It's out on Amazon right now. So Carolyn Kay, her last name is Kay. There you go.
Amy?
Okay, well, I just found out that I can put this on, the more important link, I can put it on the Discord channel for Asgard or chat for Asgard. So I'll do that. But I run stories live on YouTube. We don't have a custom YouTube link yet, so it's a mouthful and I won't torture anyone with it here, but I will post it on Discord. My own site where I do book reviews and all that kinds of stuff and talk about like literary happenings that I'm involved in is 1600wordsaday.com, or I think it's also 1600words.com. That's what it is. That's right, because it got hacked a million years ago. So anyway, yeah, that's my stuff. Sorry.
Cool. And I'm Chris Barilli. My website is authorchrisbarilli.inc. My latest novel, Shadow Blade, is out from Wordfire Press, and it's also an audiobook on Audible.
Nice.
Cool.
Nice.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, guys.
Take care.
Thanks for
Bye.
watching. Thanks for hanging.